we are going to be watching another video about punishment. We already watched one. If you haven't seen, you can go check my channel. It was really insane, really crazy punishments. It was from level 0 to level 140, the range, how bad they are. But this is kind of a part 2 of that, which we're gonna be watching from the same channel and comparing the most painful punishment.
Recover from the initial shock
and
realize you're chained
to
your chair. Moreover, some contraption keeps your mouth secured in the open position, and some tool is approaching your face. You'd love for this to be a dentist appointment, but alas, you've said things
what the hell is this?
You shouldn't have, and now they're gonna cut off your tongue since you live in the Middle Ages. In this video, you'll learn about the top most dreadful punishments that could have happened to you back then and how horrific they were according to the pain scale. The scale is based on real scientific research and gives an approximate assessment of the suffering a person can experience. We'll start with the tongue terror. So, you better put that sandwich away. Viewer discretion is advised. If, in medieval Europe, you dared to say that rain wasn't caused by prayers and killing people in the name of God wasn't exactly okay, it'd be enough to make you a heretic and a traitor. You'd be detained and sentenced to have your tongue cut off. For this, executioners devised a special tool that looks like scissors. The victim's tongue was placed between its blades, and then the torturers would tighten the screw on
it's gonna that is bad.
Handles. Often, the scissors would be heated with fire before the punishment.
No way.
This might have partly been a good thing, since this would cauterize the wound. In the Middle Ages, there was no such thing as surgery and sterility. And, apart from the instant pain, the victim would likely suffer from infections or even die from blood sepsis. Despite all this, the tongue terror torture received only 39 out of 140 points on the pain scale. In reality, the executioners rarely wanted to shut the culprit up since their job was predominantly to obtain information, or a confession. In Japan in the early 17th century, they came up with a special kind of torture to make you admit you're not a Christian. Back then, the country's last samurai government, under the helm of an authoritarian leader, outlawed Christianity, and tens of thousands of believers were persecuted. One of the most widespread methods of making a person recant their faith was a torture method called anatarushi, which literally translates to hanging. First, the victim's body was wrapped in straw or fabric and tied. Then they were hung upside down over a hole in the ground. The hole was often filled with feces to make matters even worse for the person being tortured. The executioners also made small cuts near the person's temples to lower their blood pressure to stop the victim from going unconscious. If it did happen, there were doctors nearby who would make the person come round and hang them over the hole once again. Although anatarushi received 48 points on the pain scale, some people didn't fold under the pressure of this torture. Around 2,000 Christians stayed faithful and died as martyrs. However, the main religions in today's Japan are Shintoism and Buddhism, and Christianity accounts for a meager 1.5%.
The least.
So sadly, the horrific anatarushi practice reached its goal. Executioners worldwide weren't above using the most heinous ways of achieving the desired outcome. There's a category of tortures that are scary to even talk about. However, I believe that we can't just ignore them. So, in this discussion, I'll rely on your imagination. The first thing I'd like to tell you about is the choke pear. This
choke pear. What the hell?
Metal contraption is made out of a few separate segments that open wide if we turn the screw wrench. The choke pear reportedly got its name from being used as a gag. However, it's also known as the pear of anguish. Instrumental in some
it's gonna make your mouth. Oh my god, that is bad.
Kinds of torture. The edges of its segments were sharpened. Then the executioners would heat the pear in flames.
Of course, they love heating shit.
Within the human body's various physiological openings. A person could be subjected to this torture for homosexuality or fraternizing with the devil. That is, for nothing. The pear of anguish received 67 points on the pain scale, approximately like childbirth, because it inflicted similar injuries on female victims. However, there's no historical proof of this tool being used in that exact way. This contraption is regarded as too elegant for torture. Some believe it was used as a simple juicer. However, whatever purpose the choke pear originally served, people thought they could use it for torture. And this is far from being the only tool created specifically for human genitalia. Another invention that was no less heinous was the iron spider, or the breast ripper. And yes, this name perfectly explains its use.
Wait,
With its
what?
help, the executioners punished or interrogated the women who gave extramarital birth or were accused of performing an abortion, adultery, blasphemy, or just gossiping. The iron spider was heated and secured to a wall on one side, while its sharp spikes were attached to a woman's breasts. You can imagine what ensued. Although the use of this contraption in the Middle Ages is doubtful, cutting off people's breasts as a form of punishment was used in reality. The ancient Romans subjected Christian martyrs, Agatha of Sicily, and Saint Barbara to this before executing them. Such torture takes 73 points on the pain scale.
That's it?
However, men are even less fortunate in this regard. Their intimate areas were also targeted by executioners who created the crocodile shears.
Golly, that
Instead
really does
of
look
normal
like a
blades,
crocodile.
they had a kind of chute with the jagged edges. I believe it'll suffice to say that this tool was used as a punishment only for the most heinous of crimes. For example, for trying to kill a monarch, and only on men. The scissors were heated, applied to the male sex
every
organ,
tool is heated
and
before.
used to tear it off. I don't think most men would agree with this torture landing on only 100 points on the pain scale, as it must have been unbearable. However, the executioners mainly focused on other body parts, and it was for one of them that they created this. It became one of the most popular torture tools in the Middle Ages.
That already
First
looks
and
dangerous.
foremost, during the Inquisition. It's called the knee splitter.
Oh, they put your knees in there.
The executioners would put the victim's knee in between the two bars with sharp protruding spikes and start tightening the screws. The tool's teeth would puncture the skin and the muscles and eventually break the bones. After such torture, not only did people confess to everything, even the things they didn't do, but they were also maimed for life. So in addition to going through pain that amounted to 93 points on the scale, the victims continued living with it. That is, if they didn't die of complications. The knee splitter could also be used for the hands, the elbows, and the ankles. If there was something it didn't work with, it was the head. And if, during the medieval times, the executioners kind of put up with that. In the 15th century, they invented the head crusher. It was used for simple intimidation, as well as interrogation and capital punishment. Sometimes placing a prisoner's
literally a head. I thought like they're gonna put like horizontally in you and they're gonna crush your neck like that, you know. Damn. Oh, that is bad.
Head inside the contraption was enough to get him talking, as he already knew what was coming next. First, the executioners would place his chin on the lower plank and secure the tool's upper part on the top of his head.
But
then
not
they'd
really
start to slowly tighten the screw. With each rotation, the skull would be subjected to an ever greater pressure, and the teeth would be the first to give out. Then, the jawbone would break, the skull bones would start cracking, and the eyes would burst. If the rotation were to continue, the convict's head would completely deform, and he would die while going through an unbearable pain of 108.
That's just 108? Are you serious? I mean, I get it. This one is 100 for sure, but this one? It can literally kill you, dude. And it's just 108
points, which is even worse than the crocodile shears. However, the greatest point on the pain scale stands at 140 points. So we still have some ground to cover before the end of the list. No matter your religious affiliation, you probably know that the crucifix is the main symbol of Christianity. However, today, we'll examine it as a horrific execution method used by ancient people.
They're gonna do like that.
The Persians used crucifixion to punish rebels and traitors. The Carthaginians executed enemies of the state and deserters in this way. And the ancient Romans went even further. In their culture, crucifixion was saved for the worst criminals. Rebels, enemies of the state, slaves, and non-citizens of the empire. The convict would often have to carry a 150-kilogram beam to the execution place. There, this part of the crucifix was hoisted upon the already standing pillar, and the victim was tied or nailed to it by the wrists. The executioners would write the person's crime on the horizontal beam and then leave him to suffer a horrific death. Sometimes, additional torture, like lashing, would be used to inflict even more pain on the victims. The worst was yet to come for them, however. First, they were tainted by the pain from their wounds, which would later be joined by skin burns from the sun, bites from myriads of insects, and hunger. The victim's muscles started burning like fire due to the insane tension, and at some point the legs could no longer hold the body and gave out. Then, the weight would transfer to the arms, but the arm joints weren't strong enough to hold for long, and eventually, the entire burden would be on the chest. That's when the victim would start experiencing trouble breathing. It would become more and more difficult to inhale, and the person would begin to suffocate. This horrific punishment was one of the worst in humanity's history, so it received 112 points on the pain scale. Yet, the Roman rulers seemed to like combining the execution with public shaming and humiliation. That's why they also practiced a torture called poena coulae, or penalty of the sack. It was an official kind of capital punishment for the murder of relatives, first and foremost the father, or conversely the child. The punishment consisted of sewing the convict inside a leather sack with 4 animals: a monkey, a dog, a rooster, and a snake. Then, the executioners would beat the sack with sticks and throw it into the water or leave the victim to the mercy of the beasts. The terrified animals would start scratching and gnawing at whatever was near, which was predominantly the human body. Moreover, the snake could be poisonous.
No, that is really bad,
Yet this horrific torture also had a spiritual meaning. The 4 animals in the sack weren't random. The dog symbolized the criminal's lack of respect for his parents. That comes as no surprise, since the convict was being punished for murdering one of them. The reason for this choice was that puppies are born blind for the first 9 days of their lives and can't see who they're growling at. The rooster stood for the criminal act itself, and the snake symbolized the convict's parents' grief. The monkey meant the criminal himself, since although it looks like a human, it can't be regarded as one. It's hard to tell if the symbolism itself could bring additional suffering to the convict. But they were already experiencing pain that reached 128 points.
Yeah, that deserves
on the scale.
120.
It's
That's
pretty
really
close
bad.
to the maximum point. But there were even worse tortures. For example, the iron chair.
Oh my god, look at this one, dude. They're gonna put your arms here. You're gonna sit on that? And your back will be those nails? Oh boy. They got the nails on the side as well, on the legs as well. Nah.
It was most likely a chair with a tall backrest, arms, and even a footrest. The only detail was that all of these surfaces were covered with sharp nails. With the help of belts and poles, the convict was secured on the iron chair to maximize the area of their body that touched the nails. Such contraptions were widespread in medieval Europe and could slightly differ in their design. In China, the chair was covered with the giant sharp blades, but their purpose was the same: to inflict maximum suffering on the victim. As you may know, there's a practice of standing on iron nailed covered sadhu boards. Do modern people really willingly go for medieval tortures? Actually, a few minutes after the start of the practice, if you relax, the foot pain completely disappears. But it's not the same as the iron chair. Firstly, it's impossible to compare today's nails with medieval spikes. Secondly, those tortures were accompanied by fire.
Of course they gotta heat it up again. Everything they heat it up first.
Alternatively, a fire could be started right under it. The victim was suffering from burns and carbon monoxide poisoning, so their body was constantly twitching. With every move, the nails would protrude farther into the body, making the wounds worse. Although this horrible punishment could be used to execute people for adultery, magic, or murder, the iron chair was most often nothing more than a symbol of horror. An executioner only had to remind the convict of its existence to make them submit. This comes as no surprise, since the iron chair sits at 130 points on the pain scale.
Damn, what is 140?
It's no less horrifying that in Europe, this practice remained in use until the 18th century, and in China until the earliest 20th century.
Oh, damn.
However, a record-breaking, horrific punishment that received the top points on this list is worse than everything that came before it combined. We're talking about being hanged, drawn, and quartered.
Oh, look at this one. Hanged, drawn, and wow, that is insane, dude. With the horse, not even people? Horse pulling your
Between the
ligaments?
13th and the 19th centuries, England was the place of literal fighting for the throne. If the king showed even the tiniest bit of weakness, his enemies were already preparing assassinations and rebellions against him. So, the monarch needed to come up with something to ensure no one would question his absolute power and infinite ferocity toward traitors. Reportedly, that's the origin of this most horrific punishment. It all started with the convicts being tied to a kind of wooden panel and dragged along a road for around 5 kilometers from the prison to the place of the execution. This took almost 3 hours, during which the poor victims scraped their entire bodies against the hard rocks, and people from the crowd threw garbage at them. After this, the convicts were hung on a rope in such a way that their breathing would be obstructed, yet they remained conscious. What ensued was absolute lunacy. The executioners would brutalize the convict in the most horrible ways imaginable to ensure that everyone who saw and heard about it wouldn't even think of going against the king. Moreover, it was all done while the poor person was conscious. If he were to pass out, he'd be reanimated, and the torture would continue. In the long centuries, hundreds of rebels were executed like that in England, including the legendary knight William Wallace, who fought for the independence of Scotland. It's hard to say at what point exactly the poor people subjected to this inhuman suffering would die. However, before leaving this world, they went through a torture that reached the maximum of 140 points on the pain scale. All of this is so scary that it might be better to never have heard about it. Still, in this way, firstly, you have safe content that tickles the nerves. And secondly, you now know what humanity should never go back to.
Okay, this was the part 2 of the part 1 I saw maybe a week ago. But damn, this is insane, man. This is really bad. Really bad and really sad, honestly. I mean, bro, I think so the part 1 I saw had the maximum was 138, I think so. This was just 128, dude. Damn. And they use this one at 140 as well. Same thing, like they use multiple punishments in the last one. And this one, oh my god. And nah, bro, this one is the most brutal one, I think so, because you are really suffering by time. It's not sudden death or anything like that. And this one was bad too, not gonna lie, but it's gonna take time till you die and all that. Your everything, the body parts gonna get tired and you're gonna start talking. And the chair was, oh my god, crazy, dude, crazy. And thank god we don't have any of these days, and we have just, you know, execution. We have chair, but not exactly this type of chair, you get what I mean. But yeah, overall this was the video about all these punishments. I don't know they have another part for this or not, I don't think so. But bro, all these are really bad, and really happy that we don't have this anymore. But still, sometimes I feel like they need to bring some of these back for crazy few people we got in this world still, you know, you get what I mean. So yeah, maybe we need few of these for them. But other than that, good video, amazing video, really good comparison, and really good, you know, the overall laying them on this chart and showing which one is the most and the least. But not gonna lie, all of them are really insane, really crazy. But yeah, that's it for this video, and I will see you guys in the next one.